Friends, let's take a walk through Galaxy's Edge and let me point out to you one of the details that Imagineering placed in this land with the best of intentions. And they are cool parts of Galaxy's Edge, but I think they accidentally do something that has been perceived to be pretty negative by a lot of fans. Like, there's a common complaint with Galaxy's Edge, and I think that this little design detail skews in a direction that Imagineering wasn't anticipating. It just goes to show you really never know how the general public is going to perceive your piece of art. Let's take a walk to Galaxy's Edge and I'll explain these to you. So when we come into the land, one of the first things that we see is the A-Wing sitting right here, directly across from Rise of the Resistance. And I understand, let's put aircraft in the land so it does indeed feel like the spaceport it's supposed to be. But there's an accidental consequence of placing these in here because right across the way, its neighbor is an X-Wing fighter. I mean, a ship that I absolutely loved and adored as a kid. And the first time that I came through here and I saw it, it absolutely blew me away. But that was the first time. How does it feel after the 100th time? And how does this little guy feel after the 100th time? Because I absolutely understand the intent. But the negative consequence is a lot of people complain this land feels pretty dead. Meaning, compared to some of Disneyland's greatest hits, it just lacks that kinetic energy. Sure, they hum, they hiss, even let out a little bit of mist or smoke, and they are interactive. If you go up to them with your iPhone and do little challenges, they will interact with you. But they also do something else. Let's move over to the next props so we can kind of look at the grander design scheme that's happening and why I believe this has a lot to do with a lot of people's disappointment of a land that I absolutely love. But I do want to look at it objectively to figure out, where did this design fail for others? And today when I was sitting in the land, I kind of thought about it. I'm like, oh yeah, these don't work for the narrative that most people have about Galaxy's Edge. So throughout the land, we have these different towers that seem to be putting together a sort of rogue power grid. The only problem is they're just completely stationary. No revolving satellite. There are lights at nighttime, but just no movement. And then echoing this sentiment across the way, there's the front facade for Rise of the Resistance. Maybe the most popular attraction inside of Disneyland, the front facade has absolutely no movement. Why doesn't that cannon swivel back and forth? Why don't the satellites move to the left and the right? Like, a little bit of motion here would go a long way. Like, theoretically, there's no reason why that seemingly droid head on the right there should be scanning around, looking at you, and at night even have lights coming out of its eyes that are shining down on the people below, just to feel like there is a level of surveillance before you go into Rise against the Resistance. And then this satellite here, it could be swiveling up and down, left and right, just creating a little bit more movement and storytelling. And look, I get that a lot of people's big complaint is that the land lacks kinetic energy. And I mean, the fans want something extreme like a people mover coming through here. And in fact, I did break down the third attraction that's missing from this land and what exactly this right here is. This is kind of a not completed thought, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the Bantha ride, which, don't get me wrong, would have been phenomenal. Make sure you check out that video if you haven't seen it before. But there's just no movement. So let's go a little bit further and show how subtle little tweaks could have added the kinetic energy without putting in a whole standalone attraction. Don't get me wrong, I would have loved another attraction, but there's a way to fix it. They just didn't. And I mean, here's the thing. They got so close with this land, but yet kind of just didn't quite make it. We will get away from that guy because that's going to become a mob. So here is the area dubbed the Land Speeder Garage. And this is something that, was in my other video where I tell you that this is going to be a load and unload for another attraction. Well, the attraction didn't show up and we have to make peace with that. But what did show up are a couple of different vehicles, right? Like the famous, is it Land Speeder, Sand Speeder from New Hope? And then I believe this one is from the Solo origin story. I think that's where it comes from. But we've now walked through the land and we have seen a gun tower that does nothing, satellites that don't move, different little beacons in the land that have no movement, and a grand total of 4 vehicles that are completely stationary. Well, let's move over to one other location so I can kind of tie all this together for you. You see, what's accidentally happening here is you're programming the guest experience for this to not be a living land, but instead making it feel like a display, right? Like, because nothing here moves, nothing here does anything, instead of making it feel like an active land that you're journeying and walking through, what this accidentally did was it made it feel more like a museum where different artifacts from the cinematic universe that fans love are on display, but just that, on display. So again, when guests move over to this section of droids, which always make noise as soon as I start recording, there is movement, but it is very subtle and very slight. These 2 little guys here, the creamsicle one, which I love, and the little blue and white guy, their heads do swivel back and forth. But overall, as a collection, it does start to feel like props. Let's move on. Because you see, the difference between props and walking through a museum and walking through some place that's real is vast. Like, you emotionally feel the difference. And so if guests, critical guests, came through Galaxy's Edge and there was literally movement everywhere, satellites spinning, you know, the droids actually moving, along with the other organic things happening in the land, that level of kinetic energy starts to feel a little bit more real. And with the massive set pieces, this disappointment, I think, builds even more because, I mean, Kylo's ship is to a very bizarre scale, but it's huge. And when you first see it, it's exciting. But then you quickly realize that it's just a backdrop for a stage show that infrequently happens. The ship itself doesn't really do anything. The bridge doesn't open or close. There's just no movement at all. And so, trying to not be biased by my love of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge as the designer and trying to see this from other people's perspective, I get it. You walk through the park, you see lots of different little set pieces, but they're just that, easily defined set pieces, items that are on display. The interaction, the activity, the movement, the kinetic energy, it's close to zero. And when we finally arrive to the grand finale of the land, the Millennium Falcon spaceport, let me ask you something. As beautiful as it is, looking through the eyes of others, where is the movement? And hey, I love this horizon. I love all these sight lines. I think that it is a theme park chef kiss. But objectively, there is nothing that's moving. So just imagine for a moment if the tall, like, flight control tower here, if it actually did have satellites on it that move back and forth, if these other little buildings around here did have weather detecting devices or different instruments that just simply spun in circles or went up and down, pivoted back and forth, that would make the spaceport feel more like a real spaceport instead of a prop of a spaceport. I know that we're kind of getting into the details here, but so many people have complained that the land feels stagnant, that it lacks the kinetic energy. And so the problem with going the museum route is you've set up lots of expectations for the guests, that they're going to be going through this world. But after a while, those expectations seem to get turned into lowered expectations or a letdown of like, oh, I get it. I'm walking through a museum. I'm not walking through a place that's interactive. And one of the things that people love about the Disney parks is it literally lets them step into their fantasies. And it takes worlds that they've only been to on the big screen or the small screen, makes them feel alive. And the fact that there's no movement, it does tend to make this land feel a little bit more museum and a little less theme park. And I don't quite know if that can be solved. Let me break it down to you where the moment to add this activity, sadly, may have passed. Because when you look at it objectively, from a construction, a budget, and an operations perspective, I think there was a moment. I think they debated which way to go with that moment, and I think, sadly, they let that moment pass, forever preserving this version of Galaxy's Edge kind of what it is, an amazing canvas, but a canvas that doesn't tell a very interactive or kinetic story, which I believe is where one of the #1 complaints come from. The obvious one, the elephant in the room, is most fans hate the timeline that this is all themed after. We just have to look past that in today's video and just focus on what we do have. And I will say this, the kinetic energy might be too late to fix. The timeline, there's still time on the clock to make that adjustment. That one, good news, is still possible. So even though some doors literally are shut and the land is what it is, the timeline one, that can be adjusted. But let's go back into what we're looking at today, this sort of kinetic energy problem. And I do have a couple of ideas how it could be saved in the future, but what we're looking at right now, I believe, is unfortunately set in stone. So as an artist, when you work on a project, you instantly have to make a decision. Am I going to add this to the work or not? For example, when I'm making a video, in a particular video, am I going to put historical B-roll in there? Am I going to show footage from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, etc.? If I do that, it makes the video feel deeper and it takes you to these different moments in time. But it makes the video a lot more work for me to hunt down all that footage, even though I have a pretty good system. But I have to make a decision. Do I want to visually show you every attraction or moment in history that I verbalize, or do I just want to verbalize it and just stay in the modern moment and make the video easier? Now, let's take that analogy over to what the Imagineers did. As someone who does all of this for a living and manages projects at large scales with big budgets, I have to say that they realized that if you make one piece move, you have to make it all move. Because right now, the through line are all these different props sprinkled around the land, kind of like a breadcrumb trail that leads you up here to like the climax of the land. If a couple of locations moved, it would point out all the ones that don't move. So therefore, there had to have been a conscious decision of like, man, if we get into making everything animate, that is going to add extra time and extra budget to our bottom line. And then also, obviously, that's going to bring up the quarterly and annual maintenance for the Galaxy's Edge. So thus far, it does seem to appear that a decision was made to go stagnant. No movement on anything so that at least it stays consistently still. And this, I believe, is one of the things that has made this land, to my surprise, underwhelming to, I'd say, a lot of people. And look, I get it. When people take their photos, nobody knows that nothing's moving. When all those social media moments happen, like you capture the moment, you don't capture the movement. So I can definitely understand if something had to be cut, why this was a thing that did get cut. But there is a problem. They only had one chance to do this because the expense of going back through and retrofitting everything to have animation in it, that would be ungodly expensive. You see, the moment to make this happen has long passed. There is no way that they're realistically going to go back into all of these facades, cut them open, and install mechanical components. That ship's long sailed. And all honestly, if I was working on this project, and it was between doing this and some other things, I would say, I don't think we have to make it all move because the land is that breathtaking, it's that immersive. Like, I feel like this is one of the most unbelievable set pieces Disney's ever designed. But that is me thinking like a designer, thinking like an Imagineer, and not thinking like the guests. Look, designers, sometimes we are so analytical and intellectual with the things that we do miss the forest from the trees. And I totally understand that just because it feels perfect to me doesn't mean that it feels perfect to you. So that's why I took on today's video challenge to walk through the land and literally look at where the kinetic energy moment was missed and how, honestly, I don't think Disney can ever get back to that moment. I'm Brickey. I hope today's video was a fun exercise in critiquing something that I love, but trying to see it from a perspective that has been shared to me by others, because one of the things I love doing on this channel is using my design knowledge to help people better understand the way things have made them feel inside of the Disney parks. And if you are curious about the third attraction that didn't show up, make sure you watch this video right here. I think I could convince you what it was supposed to be and where it was supposed to go and how it's still possible. Thank you so much for showing up. I appreciate you. I'll see you tomorrow.